That's Mr. with Carrie. Although it's spelled as Carrie, but it sounds like Carrie when he sings it, right? Good morning to you and welcome to the Brightside. We are so happy to see a very, very beloved face in our studio right now. Sha-En Yeo, the best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and...
Yes, incoming president of the Asia Professional Speakers Singapore, El Presidente. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Happy to be here again.
Yes, and also our dear founder of the Happiness Scientist, a happiness scientist herself. And I do love the topic that we will be discussing today.
Yeah, Sha-En, we're going to be talking about resilience. So why don't you tell us about that and why it's important to be resilient?
Yeah, I think when we think about resilience, it's about how do you cope during a challenge or a tough time, but also how do you recover? Right? Because of course when you're going through it, you think about recovery. That's going to be some time depending on what you're experiencing. And many people think of it as bouncing back. But I like to think of it as moving forward, sometimes slowly. I mean, to be realistic. Yeah, and we think about resilience. Why is it important? Well, I mean, we all go through different difficult things through our life, right? And the ability to recover is so vital, because if you're severely impacted by that negative event and can't function, then not only can't you work, the people around you who depend on you are also going to be struggling. That's right? True. And then overall your whole psyche is also going to be affected. So resilience is critical for us to, thrive in this world.
I didn't realize here, but it's gotten me thinking that you being resilient also helps those around you.
Yeah,
for
they
sure.
feed off that, right?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And what would you say are the main components of resilience?
I mean, there's emotional resilience, which most people, when they refer to resilience, don't really think so much about the emotional aspect. And that's the ability to regulate, to navigate all the challenging emotions that you feel. And very often, it's a wide range of emotions when you're going through a difficult thing, right? Sometimes you have anguish, sometimes you have relief when maybe whatever appeared to be bad news is not as bad. But there's all these emotions, and where do they go? Right? How do you express it? How do you manage it? So there's one aspect on the mental side, emotional side. Then of course there's the mental side, which is the thoughts that go through your mind. How do you perceive the situation at hand? Yeah. Right? Do you perceive it as like, oh gosh, the world is over for me? Because if that's the way you see it, then it's really hard to recover from that. Yeah. Because it seems really absolute. Right? And then how do you navigate those thoughts that come in that seem like everything is really, really, really bad? And then you might end up staying there, which is what most people fear. Okay. Right? You sink into depression, for example.
Like you get into a rut.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I'm not saying that people don't get in there, people do, but being able to notice it, being able to know what to do with it, I guess is how you can build capacity to be resilient.
This is fantastic. And, there's so much more to be shared about resilience. We're also going to talk about, how can we build it in kids, adults? Is it different for both these groups? We're going to chat even more. So come and join us on our Facebook Live at facebook.com/1FM913.
1FM 91.3. Happy Father.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to our Facebook Live here on 1FM 91.3. Sha-En Yeo is in the studio with us, our happiness scientist, and El Presidente. Did I say that right, Shehzad?
Yes.
Incoming. To be El Presidente of the Asia Professional Speakers Singapore. That is really exciting. You're going to be super busy, I'm sure.
Yeah, but meaningful busy, because it's been a community I've been part of for like 6-7 years.
She's showing a lot of resilience right now.
Well, finding meaning and purpose in what you do is an important component of resilience. It is.
Okay.
Because let's say you're going through something difficult and then you think, okay, what does this all mean for me? Right? I'm not saying that everybody has to think that way, but if you're able to find that deeper meaning or purpose, it at least gives you a bit more fuel to take the next day, it allows you to persevere.
That's a very good point.
I like that.
I mean, especially if you like what you do, that can keep you going. So that will contribute to my resilience, for example. Is that it?
Yes, for sure. Like, for example, in my business, sometimes we encounter obstacles. Client rejection happens almost all the time, right? And then as a speaker, sometimes you get cancelled. Yeah. And so if your mentality is like, oh no, the moment I get cancelled, I quit, then you don't persevere. But if you think, hey, sometimes this message is more important than us being cancelled, we persist and we continue and we, take the next day and we move on.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So,
yeah, what I wanted to ask was, in the midst of all of this, when you are being resilient for the sake of others as well, but actually you feel that you have to almost put that on. That's tough as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we call the zone of coping.
Right.
Like, say, a parent and a child, when the family goes through something difficult, a parent has to cope and survive. But I guess we want to make the distinction between coping, survival, and thriving, right? So if you're resilient, you can tahan. That's what I mean, right? Coping is tahan. That means like, okay, it's 3 months, I can do it.
I'll get through, I'll power through.
And then after that, like I need a vacation, like massive one to recover. And that's okay, because then it's a limited time and you know that you can go through it and you have already set your mindset around it.
Okay.
Yeah, but if let's say it's for a prolonged period of time and you have no outlet to process those emotions or those thoughts, or if someone to hold space for you, because resilience is also about community, relationships.
Right.
And if you have to do it alone, it would drain your reserves, for sure. Right? So a parent who has to say, deal with a difficult situation at home and it's prolonged, or like a workplace situation that's toxic and challenges at home, at some point this person's going to be burnt out because the reserves get drained.
Two fronts is tough, isn't it?
So a burnout is something that could happen with the lack of
emotional
resilience.
fatigue.
Okay.
It's possible. Like, it presents that way. I mean, one of the components of resilience is the ability to see the possibility, the optimism, right? And then also being able to persevere. Yeah. But of course, we want to make sure that they have an outlet and not just, keep tahaning, because in the long run that's going to be difficult.
Right. I can see how like that can really be very, very damaging, on the self and gosh, even the community, like you said, the family as well, when that burnout happens.
What would cause, say, the lack of resilience?
Oh, there are many factors. Like, obviously, for a child, for example, there are family factors.
Okay.
So, I mean, skills like resilience is often thought of you either have it or you don't. But actually, it's a capacity. It can be built. It can be developed. So a child who's not explicitly taught how to be resilient may not naturally learn it. I mean, in the past, it seems like we could just have it somehow, right? Whether it's physical,
it's inherent.
You go and climb a tree, then you can become strong, right? Yeah, but I mean, in this time and age, the children are facing very different challenges. Are they equipped to face cyber challenges, for example, if we don't teach them, right? So I strongly believe resilience is a capacity building, right? And of course, family factors, like I mentioned just now, if they have a strong family support, it's going to contribute to their ability to be resilient. It's what we call protective factors. Right? And non-protective factors that draw away from that resilience could be strained relationship, no support. Like maybe some of them have poor emotional capacity to start and don't know how to cope, or can't learn it as well, right? So those things, and of course, if the external environment, like you're going through war, that could be also like, you don't have stability. Yeah. So these are all what we call like protective or non-protective.
Well, it seems like
factors.
that key term instability would definitely affect resilience, right? You don't have to be in a war-torn country, but just that instability, like maybe in a family situation and all that.
And which is why and we come back to some fundamental things that actually from age 1 or 2 it starts to develop, which we call attachment. Security in attachment to somebody in your life, a caregiver, can help you bolster against challenges that you face.
Really?
Yeah.
That is interesting.
And it develops from young, So if you have that one person, or at least you're assured that you're safe in your home, right? Then that gives you the confidence to go out there and say, yes,
the attachment.
There are difficult things in my life, but I have someone I can.
You have like a safe space and a pillar that you can, rely on. That's interesting. That I find very interesting.
What I'm fascinated about is and I want to make that distinction because kids obviously get very attached to their parents, and then I often quite wonder, like, if my sons, they have their father or mother in their shadow, how do they build up their own resistance? How do we get? I mean, it's great that we're there protective, we're there to protect them, but
for sure.
Does that?
I
get
what you're
reliance
saying.
On us?
Yeah, and I guess when I was talking about attachment, it forms early in childhood, but of course, as a kid matures, you want them to be independent. But the process of how to support them to be independent is something that people see as either black or white. Okay, so now you're 7 primary school. Okay, now you're independent. But the child cannot just suddenly become independent
Right.
without some priming, without talking through what it means to be independent.
I'm just going to scratch that out of my to-do list. Yeah,
Don't
can't just
just
throw my kids into the deep end. Shucks.
Or like, you hear a lot of, I hear, because I work a lot with schools, about fear of failure in,
Right.
in
Right.
children.
Right.
And therefore I get called in, and can you teach our kids to be resilient? And so a lot of it also depends on the parent modeling. What does resilient behavior look like?
Yes.
Because if a parent models that, oh no, my boss scolded me, die lah, then the child's going to pick up all these narratives and it will carry with them, right?
Sure.
But
That's
if
a
we
good
say,
point.
I went through something today, it was difficult. Or let's say they tried to make a friend in primary 1. They couldn't. The friend ignored them. It was difficult. We relate, first of all, to the emotions, right? Talk about emotional resilience.
So it might be quite good to even talk about troubleshooting in front of your kids.
Of course.
With your
Yes.
spouse.
Really?
And sometimes you'll be
That's a good
surprised.
idea.
Kids are very resourceful. They can suggest ideas to
Suggestions.
you. And
Oh my God,
this
that would be
process of co-creating actually helps them be included in your conversation. That's wonderful,
And
And
I'd be like, Shehzad, my son told me to tell you. We're going to jump back on air and let's talk a little bit more about resilience in children's versus resilience in adults. I really like how you pointed out it can be built up. Let's talk more on air.
Madonna with Hung Up here, 1FM 91.3. And yeah, we don't want kids too hung up on one thing or the other. They got to be, got to toughen them up.
Sha-En, she mentioned, right,
Yeah.
as we were on Facebook Live about how you're brought into many schools because kids these days really have a fear of failure. And that is where you need to come in. The schools ask you to come in to talk about and to help them build resilience. So is it different for kids versus adults? Like what are the things we should be mindful of as parents ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we got to ask, why do they fear failure? It's not something that's natural, because
No.
when they fall, when they're trying to learn how to walk, they're not scared.
Yeah.
They're
They'll
just
get up
doing
and
it.
do it again.
But
yeah.
a lot of it is the response from the adult in their life. You fall, ayo, then the super big response sometimes gives them the idea that there's a problem. And I've been through this. Like I did
think
the
I've
same
done that.
thing, right? And so we talk about overprotection.
Yeah.
At a young age, you are really worried about their safety. Perhaps it's natural to respond that way. But when they reach a certain age and they actually can manage, maybe we need to pull back. And sometimes we don't. It's finding hard to let go,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, like for example, I've had schools tell me there are kids who are 10 and the parents still tying the shoelace for them.
Oh no,
So-
actually that's me.
And
I
how
may have been guilty of that.
and I know why, because sometimes in the rush,
Yes.
you're like, quick lah.
Let's just get it done.
But what happens is the kid does not build capacity to do things on their own, which is
Yeah.
what independence is about.
That's true.
Right? Or if they're
That's true.
facing a situation in school, you may not need to tell them 100% immediately, but we can ask them questions to build capacity, like, what do you try to do? How did the person respond? What are some other things you tried? And I like this principle of try 3 things before coming to ask me, because if you try 3 things, I know that you have put in some effort.
Yeah.
And they failed. That's okay. It didn't work, but we learn what did not work, right? And then we try something else.
I kind of like this because failing is not failing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a
just,
process.
It's a process to get
It's
there.
how you learn.
Do you think we sometimes put too much stock in you have to get it right all the time?
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, because getting it right feels good, right? It's
Yeah.
validating.
Validation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and validation is like it's a very human need. It's like
kind of
if
addictive.
if I'm not validated, then I'm not worth anything.
Right.
It comes down to sometimes some fundamental things like this. And so we want to validate the right things. We validate the process.
Yeah.
We validate their effort as opposed to validate just the outcome.
And I know this always sounds cliche, but is it accentuated by the social media world as well? All the validation?
Yeah, and the social media world is curated, right? You curate to show only the nice things. So, and sometimes people don't talk about how difficult it was to get there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and so as parents, I think we need to talk about that. Like for example, my younger daughter is doing gym, and sometimes it's very difficult. It's painful. She falls, she gets bruises.
Sure.
And so I just tell her, well, when you fall and you bruise, let's look back at what you were 2 sessions ago. How far have you come? And then she realizes that oh, that's hard. But I did it. And this is building her capacity.
I love the fact she's also in the studio with us.
Yeah,
right
she
now.
is.
That's
She
great.
is. And you know what? Good job, Zoe, on your gymnastics. You know, I
I'm
always
very
wish
proud
that
of
I
her.
could. Yeah,
She
I've
suddenly
always
looked
wished
up
I
from a
could.
book and went, "Oh, I'm being talked about on air right now." Okay.
All good things, Zoe. All good things. Don't worry. No, but I didn't realize that resilience has such a link towards, of course, dealing with the fear of failure, but more towards independence, right? It's very closely linked as what you're pointing out. I really mind blown. The lights have gone on.
You need to
Chandelier.
play, you need to
wait.
play Chumbawamba. I
What?
get knocked down and I get up again.
Yes, it's
I like that song.
Yeah.
This has been a really great talk about resilience. Now, before we go, maybe we can just summarize what are 2 key takeaways, if we could have any, about resilience?
Resilience is both emotional and mental. You know, sometimes we focus so much on the mental, how we perceive it, but we forget to process the emotions. People can become resilient by learning how to manage, regulate, and express the emotional side of things. Right, we talked about that right at the beginning.
Yep.
And number 2, you know, you even if you don't have or you don't think you are resilient, maybe you can ask yourself some questions and look back and say, what have I been able to do in the past? You'll be surprised. You'll see a lot of things you've been able to do. But sometimes we forget about it, or we don't focus on it, and we think, I'm not doing well now, hence I'm totally not resilient.
Sha,
But, yeah.
what does Lavi do? She has a problem with too many watches and only one wrist. How does she show resilience for that? Because she's been talking about that being a big issue for her.
So embarrassingly enough, we had a discussion topic about first world problems, you know, and I was just joking about how that is my first world
Joking,
problem.
not joking.
Okay, just too. I do have too many watches because I like to buy watches.
Be strong, Lavi. Be
Sorry,
strong.
no, but swatch. The others just watch. You know.
First time I heard that tagline.
Oh yeah, is there a
My
tagline?
God,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not a
yeah.
watch person.
Same.
See?
I feel like is a different R word for me. It's not about resilience. It's about resistance. Don't buy so many things, Lovey. Right?
Ooh, that's a fine line there. Oh yes.
But thank you so much,
Thank you,
Sha-En.
Sha.
No, thank you for
And
having me always.
If we want to find out more about what you have shared here, you can always log on to, you've got a website, happiness-scientist.com.
Yeah.
Find her on her Instagram, Happiness Scientist as well, or even
Yeah.
her personal IG, which is Sha-En Yeo.
Yes.
Sha-En, thanks once again.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Sha-En.
guys. Love it.
Good times, greatest hits.
Good times, greatest hits. 1FM.